Hey everyone, Kristen Gutierrez, broker associate with eXp Realty, and today's topic is really just navigating escrow with ease. So in the state of California, we use an escrow company to assist with our real estate transactions. So I want to kind of go over what they do, a little bit about the process, and then talk about some tips for sort of navigating escrow with ease. So first of all, escrow plays a very crucial role in real estate transactions by ensuring security and transparency for both buyers and sellers. They are a neutral third party, and their job is to hold funds and documents on behalf of the parties involved in the transaction. So by doing this, they ensure that all conditions of the transaction and the purchase agreement are met before releasing any funds and thereby completing the transfer of ownership. Okay. The escrow process typically involves several key stages. This includes opening escrow, which is often done by the listing agent. It can be done by the buyer's agent, but it's typically done on the listing side. They handle the receipt of the funds, both the initial deposit and the remaining down payment that's usually wired in by the buyer, and also the funds wired in or sent in by the lender. They make sure that all of the paperwork for title that ensures the transfer from seller to buyer is created and sent to the right people. And they just act as that neutral third party. So each stage along escrow requires coordination between the buyer, the seller, the lender, the escrow officer, title officer, and both agents in order to really ensure a smooth transaction. So as you can see, there's a lot of parties involved in the transaction. Escrow also provides a layer of security and transparency in real estate transactions, and they do this by safeguarding funds and documents until all conditions are met. This helps to prevent fraud. It prevents disputes between the parties, miscommunication, and they also ensure that all parties adhere to the terms of the purchase agreement. So this reduces the risk of some misunderstandings or legal issues. So let's talk a little bit now that we kind of understand what escrow is and a little bit about the escrow process. Let's talk about some tips for navigating escrow. Okay, so first of all, you want to choose a reputable escrow company. A lot of times as buyers and sellers, you may or may not be familiar with a reputable escrow company. So how do you kind of go about finding that? Well, in partnering with a seasoned and knowledgeable real estate agent to represent you, they usually have relationships with reputable escrow companies. And so they can refer people that they have also created good business relationships with. Okay, so you want to start there, knowing that you have a reputable, good, knowledgeable escrow company. The next thing is to make sure that you're kind of staying organized, right? So keep all relevant documents such as purchase agreements, inspection reports, loan documents, organized and readily accessible throughout the escrow process. Of course, if you have a good agent involved, that agent, part of their job is to keep all of those relevant documents organized and readily accessible and to provide them to escrow on your behalf. In addition, it's good and important to always communicate effectively, keep open lines of communication and things like that with the escrow officer, complete any documents that they provide to you in a timely fashion. There are a number of documents as both the seller and the buyer that must be completed during a real estate transaction. And so it's really critical when you receive those documents to read them, ask any questions about them right away, and then complete them and return them to the appropriate party so that the escrow process can continue along in a timely manner. Bottom line is escrow doesn't have to be daunting. The buying and selling process can be a little overwhelming, but by understanding the escrow process, at least having a little basic understanding of it, and then getting more familiarity with it as you kind of move along in the process, follow my tips. And then by doing that, both buyers and sellers can navigate the escrow process with sort of ease and confidence. I want to talk a few kind of FAQs for you. Typically, how long does the escrow process take? It can vary depending on various factors, such as the complexity of the transaction, the responsiveness of all parties involved, and then any contingencies that need to be resolved. But typically our average escrows are somewhere between kind of 25 to 45 days. That tends to be the standard. We can shorten it in certain scenarios, and sometimes it can be extended past that as well. But that 25 to 45 days is typically the average. Who pays for the fees? So in the state of California, when we use escrow, it is fairly standard that the fees are split between buyer and seller, where the buyer pays their fees, associated fees, and the seller pays theirs. It is not necessarily that the total fees for the transactions are split 50-50. It's more that whatever has been attributed to the buyer's part of the transaction, the buyer pays for, and they are charged by escrow, and then same thing for the seller side. This is typically determined in the purchase agreement as part of the terms of that contract. So you can always ask more questions from your agent when you have one, but that's the typical way of how escrow fees are paid. And then what happens with escrow if the transaction falls through? So it's standard for the escrow officer to require that both the buyer and the seller mutually cancel the escrow via a form. And then once that is done, they will release any funds that they have at that particular time back to the appropriate party. So that pretty much sums it up on escrow and what it is. For more real estate related topics, check out some of our other videos at Kristen Gutierrez Real Estate.